In today's little post-processing tutorial, I will show you how I turned this photo of Tawhai Falls in New Zealand into this more moody version of the photo. And the tutorial involves adding some mist around the falls, darkening the image to create a more moody atmosphere, and also, as I showed you in the last tutorial, some dodge and burn to finish it off. But first things first, the photo you see here was already processed. I started with this one, which is a blended photo where I did some focus stacking and also some exposure blending. And you see, as usual for my workflow, this starting point contains a lot of details. There are no blown out highlights and no dark tones which are completely black. So I have a lot of information to work with. And after this, I went through my normal processing. I added contrast, I worked a bit on the colors, and I turned the photo into this version, which is already quite good. And if you're interested in the different steps I do for this or for such a processing, you can look at my more in-depth start to finish tutorials, which you'll find on my homepage. But now I want to show you how to get a little more mood into this photo. Because if you look close here, you see around the waterfall, there's already a little bit of mist and atmosphere. And I want to enhance it a bit, and I'd like to point the viewer a little bit more into the center of the scene, because currently there are many details also to the edges, and the center of focus should be the waterfalls and the stream here. So how did I get to this photo? Let's start by adding some mist here in the background, and for this I create a new empty layer, and I get the rectangular marquee tool and just create a small rectangle here. Now I grab a filter, and you find this clouds filter here under render, and I just press OK, and this creates some cloud pattern. So this is nothing I can use yet. What I first have to do, I have to scale it. So this is too detailed, and by scaling it now, making it a lot bigger, those clouds get more of the shape of some mist or fog. And this is not yet finished. I'll also add a little blur to this. So some Gaussian blur will like maybe 10 pixels. And also, to finish this off, I add a levels adjustment, and what I'll do, I bring up this triangle here. So currently we have some dark tones in this cloud pattern which are completely black, and I don't want this. I want to have it more like a dark gray, and the reason for this you'll see very shortly. But first, let's make this a little more gray and flatten this. So Control E after selecting those two layers. So what do I do with this cloud pattern now? I can go to the channels palette here and control click on the RGB. And what this does, it loads the brightness values into a selection. So if you have seen my masking tutorials, you already know this step. Now I can hide this, create a new layer, and with the selection still active, I press down here on the mask. And what I now have, I have those clouds or this cloud pattern as mask for this new layer here. And now I can throw away this original cloud layer and start working on the image. So what I'll now do to add some mist here, I grab a brush and I select a light gray. And with the brush and like 10%, I just draw on this area here. I can also go to like 5% to have a little less opacity for the drawing here. I can also change to a more darker gray or even with a little bit of bluish tint. And I continue to draw here. I can draw on this side a bit, also in the foreground. Go to yet a darker gray. See the before and after. And because I have this mask active, let's just shift click on it to deactivate it. So if I deactivate this mask, you see there's no structure to this mist. So it's just drawn with the normal brush, and it doesn't really look like mist. But by adding this mask here, I get some structure, so some irregularities in the mist. And this is quite nice and makes it quite easy to add some atmosphere to the image here. So let's maybe add a bit more here to the sides, to the top. And I usually, or what I do, I add a little bit more mist here, close to the waterfalls, and a little less the farther I go out, which is how it would look in reality. So after I now added this mist here, the next step to give this image a bit more mood is to create some darkening, and I'll start by selecting some circular area in the middle, then Control-Shift-I, invert this selection, and now I create a curves layer and I darken it. And I darken it very much. And if you have seen my Dodge and Burn tutorial, you know this gradient helper I use. And with this gradient helper I see which areas get completely black. I can quickly show this again. So it's basically a normal gradient map, red to green, and I just put this black triangle to 250 and the white triangle to 6 in this case, and this gives me some exposure warnings as I would have in Lightroom. So what can I do to protect the dark areas? I can pull up this side of the curve a bit. So this prevents areas getting complete black. What I now do, I grab a filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and use a very high radius here to create a soft vignette. And now with a brush, I refine it a bit. For example, I also want to darken those rocks a bit. So starting with the circular shape I had in the beginning, I'll refine it a bit. And for example, here, this light reflection, I'll keep this. I darken this areas a bit, remove a little bit on this side. So again, some creative drawing. And now let's see, we started here with this already nice image, but there wasn't a clear focus in the center, so lots of details to the sides and to the front. And now we arrived at this image, which already contains much more atmosphere. And I can put those two in a group, put a mask on it, and I could now go in and also remove a bit of the effect if I wanted, add it again. So I have complete flexibility over this. And as a final step now, I use Dodge and Burn So I set a new layer to soft light. I zoom out very far, take a black brush with like 10% and also darken some areas which I find a little bit too distracting. I can also work on the water a bit, give it a little bit more structure. Yeah, and this is basically a way to give the image more mood, make it a little darker, and yeah, remove some distracting details.